Just going to talk about the 5D Classic menu. I'm going to go through every setting, so I'm going to really go into every setting with these videos. And quality is the first one, so let's go into quality and take a look. So on the left hand side you've got all the JPEG sizes, so there's so much to choose from. You find this on every camera that you don't know what to set, and something you want to really take a look at is what you actually need. I mean, at weddings a large JPEG obviously is the largest file size in pixels that comes out the camera, but you actually need that. I used to send across a medium JPEG to my backup device and I could print very large from that medium. So the little jaggedy edge symbol just means it's been compressed more to make a smaller file size. So either of these are the same pixel dimensions, but this is a different file size, so it crushes it more. So you can either play around with this and send off and get prints, but I thought I'd just show you, not only what I found out, but what other people have found out with this camera. So a big thing that people don't realise is that the medium setting is actually turns out to be a crispier, sharper JPEG. It's just one of those things. I'm not going to go into the technicalities. I've read so much on this at the beginning. So a large JPEG is not quite as good a file. So I personally think you should try and produce a medium JPEG first. Start printing at 12 by 8 and just see what you think. Now on the right hand side you can produce a JPEG and you can add to it a RAW file. That's all this means. Just think you're creating a nice clean JPEG out the camera with all of the settings, so neutral and whatever you've done, and then on the right hand side you've got a RAW file to add to it. And quite simply, the RAW file is really more than a negative. It's a file that can get you out of jail, I call it. So if you get in a mess with white balance and your camera is nowhere near on white balance, a typical one for us is lighting in churches. So when we're doing weddings, we find that the colours of the light in churches can be all over the place, and you come back from the wedding, you think, thank goodness I got a RAW file. So being able to save your white balance in Lightroom afterwards is the main reason for using a RAW file for me at weddings. I'll be quite honest, I quite happily shoot JPEG out this camera day to day, but as far as weddings are concerned, there's no way that I ever would think about not bringing home a RAW file. And plus I bring that RAW file into Lightroom, so that means that I can play around with it to my heart's content. Now pixel dimensions, people get confused with this. The pixel dimensions are exactly the same as the JPEG. So the physical pixels and the size of the print exactly the same. But the RAW file is a very large file compared to the JPEG, because a JPEG is a crushed file. So they literally compress it so that you can save some space on your card. So for me, where I ended up in the end a lot of the time was RAW plus medium JPEG. That meant I could get a lot of these medium JPEGs onto my iPhone or the iPad, depending on which one I was using to back up, and I would use the iFi card to just ping across that medium JPEG. I knew the bottom line was, if that RAW file, anything happened and I ended up being able to retrieve the JPEGs, lots of things can happen. I knew that backed up JPEG was large enough that 99.9% of brides and grooms would not ever know, and I'd be fine. So the compression there, I did move on and compress it as well, I must admit. So you could fit more on your device, so that made very little difference, to be honest with you. It's not going to wreck the quality of the file. So for me, that's where I ended up. And you should just start in the middle and just see how you get on. You might have a workflow where you may be thinking about social media and just uploading quickly. So RAW and S, so you've got the original RAW file, and you just save a compressed S as well, a small file. So pixel dimensions have gone down, and this is what you've got to get into, start thinking about what pixel dimensions you need. But for web and emailing and general sort of family use, you'll be absolutely fine with that JPEG. And you'll know that on the hard drive, just keep all your raw files. I backed up all my raw files. I've got a cupboard full of hard drives, and that's the way I'll move on for the foreseeable future, really, is just to keep collecting the raw files. So quality wise, always a raw with me, and then it depends what I'm doing. At a wedding, I might be here or here. I've got no problem with the size of that print, so I can produce an album with that and give it to a bride, that medium, no problem. And plus it saves space on the device you're pinging across, and saves you time because it's a Wi-Fi connection between the card and your iPhone or Android, whatever you're using. That saves a lot of time. I can literally sit there and watch the large JPEGs trundling across thinking, oh my goodness, you know. You've got these little breaks in time at weddings, so you know you've got 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, say, you know. So just bear that in mind. That was my reason for going down here into medium, was that second JPEG, but you'll find that file's absolutely fine. So let's just talk a little bit about color temperature while we're talking about that. The great thing about the 5D is you can set 5000K. Now 5000K is where I base all of my white balances from. The light that I'm using to light here, I've literally dialed in the back of the light and we've got 5000K coming out of it. I then do a white balance, just to let you know. So we use a white balance card to get good color, and I base all of my color temperature from 5000K. Having a benchmark of 5000 allows you to move up and down and make your images cooler or warmer. So I know 5200 comes up a lot when people are talking, of 5500, but these small jumps don't actually make that much difference on a finished print, believe it or not. I've printed out and looked at this, and you know, it doesn't make a massive difference. So having a benchmark of 5000K will really help you with your white balance, and that's a critical one for me. Although I can change them afterwards because I use RAW, I need a benchmark. And again, flash guns 5000K, I've measured my flash guns color temperature against these newer lights. I'll link to all this in the description. Actually, what I've started doing in the description is just listing all the equipment that I'm using at the moment, and I'll just add to it as I go along. So it's worth going down, having a look in the description for the video, and you'll find some useful links. So that's all we've got. I'm mainly shooting white balance, auto white balance, I have to say, at weddings. And then when it comes to everything else, I'm just manually setting white balance now. So there we go. Color space, sRGB or Adobe RGB. This only really concerns the JPEG. So if you only produce a JPEG file, then sRGB and Adobe RGB is quite a critical decision, really. And color spaces, I mean, maybe I'll do something about color spaces. To me, to be honest with you, it's one of those subjects that is a bit too far in photography. Not too far for me, as in that's the level that I'm trying to go to with learning about every little detail now, because I'm at that age. But for most people, you're not really going to see a massive difference. If you employed a printer and you gave him a raw file, it wouldn't, sRGB or Adobe wouldn't make a difference. He'd assign the profile when he exported the raw file. So just bear that in mind. Raw files and color space, you assign that when you export it as a JPEG or a TIFF before you print it. So this in camera, the only reason I can really think to get worried about it too much is the fact that sRGB is read by web browsers. So if you were doing the workflow where you were doing quality and maybe producing a small file for social media so you can just get it out there really quick, so you don't want to really resize it in Photoshop, Well, just remember that web browsers like sRGB and they do not really like Adobe RGB. So let's just go back up again. Always getting lost. There we go. So don't get too worried about if you're recording a RAW file, but just remember the JPEG that's coming out of the camera will be assigned that profile. And that does matter. They are two different color spaces. Web browsers like sRGB, web browsers find Adobe complicated, and it's really for when you're printing. Let's look at a few other things that are in here that we can look at. Histograms confuse everybody. Again, you've got an RGB histogram or a brightness histogram. So let's have a quick talk about that. So brightness histograms are what I use. The only thing I'm interested in an image is the highlight point. Now, not every image has got a highlight. I actually often introduce a highlight. So they've got a white square on this WhiBal card. I often introduce a highlight just so that I can pick it out on the histogram, and I work from the highlight. So RGB to me, histogram, and just to let you know what that is, let's just press play and see what we've got. That's a very, very interesting photo. So there we go, we've got an RGB histogram, and we've got the flash in there, which is saying the highlight's just on the edge. That's the only thing I'm interested in, is that highlight that's just on the edge. So the readout of RGB to me is a waste of time. I'm not interested in that. What I do is I set it to brightness, and all that you'll get then is this nice white histogram and the right hand end and the highlight alert. That's the way I work. Everybody's different. If you worked in a studio and you're taking it to the nth degree, histograms, especially with video, because video is really outputting a JPEG really. You know, they have got raw video now, but you're spending a lot on equipment. We're lucky that with photography we've got this nice raw file to work with. So the only thing that really matters to me is where that highlight is and if it's blown out. I'll do a whole other video on this at some stage. I know I always say that, but I will. There's so much I want to put out there at the moment. The 5D Classic really does like being high and exposing to the right, and what that means is actually when that's flashing, most people would be going, that's the end of the world. That if that was a wedding dress, I'd be more than happy with that. In fact, I'd take it even further. And then I use the raw file to recover the highlights. So exposing hot or high or overexposing, some people call it. It depends on the camera, sensor, processor, the whole combination. I've recently, well, a few months ago before this lockdown, I was doing a course with the Nikon 750D. Now, if you look at the screen and you see it flashing like mad like that, you then get the file on your computer and it's absolutely fine. And some cameras have a very good readout and are very accurate, and some don't. So just bear that in mind when you're looking at flashing highlights like that. The histogram's the one to look at, and I'm looking at the peak at the very end of the histogram and then just assessing. And I'm doing that very quickly at a wedding, and because I work in blocks of time, chunks, I chunk out a wedding really. So say it is bridal prep and it's makeup photos, you know, you're doing that would be a chunk of exposure that I would do, and I would set manually, always working manually, and then I would expose for the highlight and just work in a chunk. And when I moved and it was bridesmaids in another room, I reset, manual mode, fixed position, slow down, get what I need, move on. So chunking out your photography will really help a lot. It's one of the main pieces of advice that I give to people, is to really chunk it out. Don't keep running around. Mobile phones have done that to people. Don't keep running around. Slow down, work in manual mode, and you'll produce better results. You know, it's a fact. I mean, a lot of people produce amazing flukes, which is absolutely fine, and I love creative photography. I love flukes, absolutely brilliant. But when it comes down to produce a repeatable system, you need to chunk it out, the wedding, and well, anything really, whatever I'm doing. So we'll do something else on that one day. This is getting up to 14 minutes now, so we'll just do a little bit more. I've only bumped the LCD brightness up because I'm recording this video and just testing this new light out. So I would normally have that in the middle. Let's just show you. That would normally be down there. So that's only because of the video. So I think that's it for now. Just talking a bit about quality and a few menu settings. I have got a video I did years ago with all of the settings that I was doing for weddings, so I'll link to that at the end of this one. As I say in the description below, you'll always see the links. They are Amazon links, I have to tell you that, so I might get 1, 2, 3% depending on how Amazon feel. But please use the links, they do support this channel. This is my main source of income now. So no weddings anymore. I can't see weddings returning for a very long time in the true sense of what a wedding is to me. So I'm moving away from weddings and starting something new. So this YouTube channel is a big part of that. So I appreciate if you do use the links. Don't have to buy anything, but just using them is a great thing. It helps me, helps the channel. Okay, so I'll see you again soon.